The blizzard hit Montana territory with such fury that Ophelia Andrews knew she would die if she did not find shelter within the hour. And when the snow-covered outline of a small cabin emerged through the white chaos, she believed God Himself had answered her desperate prayers. Her horse had thrown her 3 miles back when lightning split a pine tree, and she had been stumbling through drifts that reached her thighs ever since. Her fingers numb inside her gloves, her face burning with cold. The cabin door stood slightly ajar, snow piling against it, and she shoved her way inside without ceremony or thought to who might be within. "Close that door before you freeze us both," a rough voice commanded from somewhere in the darkness. Ophelia spun, her heart hammering, and saw a man crouched beside a stone fireplace, coaxing flames from stubborn kindling. He did not look at her, focused entirely on his task, but she could see he was tall even kneeling, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and broad shoulders beneath a worn flannel shirt. "I am sorry," she managed through chattering teeth. "My horse bolted. I would have died out there." "Probably," he agreed, still not looking up. "Push something against that door. The latch is broken." She did as instructed, shoving a heavy wooden chair against the door to keep the wind from blowing it open. The cabin was small, perhaps 15 feet square, with a single window shuttered tight against the storm. A narrow bed occupied one corner, a rough table and 2 chairs the center, and shelves lined one wall holding canned goods and supplies. A rifle hung above the door, and saddle gear was piled in the opposite corner from the bed. The man finally got his fire going and stood, turning to look at her for the first time. He was younger than his voice suggested, perhaps 27 or 28, with gray eyes that assessed her with neither warmth nor hostility, merely practical evaluation. A dark beard shadowed his jaw, and a scar cut through his left eyebrow. "You are soaked through," he said. "You need to get out of those wet things, or you will be dead by morning anyway." Ophelia looked down at herself. Her traveling dress was indeed soaked, the hem frozen stiff with ice, and her cloak dripped steadily onto the wooden floor. She was shivering so hard her teeth clicked together. "I have nothing else," she said. He moved to a trunk at the foot of the bed and pulled out a shirt and pair of trousers. "These will be too big, but they are dry. Turn around." She blinked. "What? I am going to change too. We will both turn around and be civilized about it." "Unless you would rather die of pneumonia to preserve some notion of modesty." His practicality cut through her shock. She took the clothes and turned to face the wall, hearing him do the same behind her. Her fingers were so cold she could barely work the buttons of her dress, and she fumbled with them, frustrated tears pricking her eyes. Everything that had happened in the past week crashed over her suddenly. Her father's death in Holbrook, the lawyer who had informed her that the ranch was mortgaged beyond saving, her decision to travel to her aunt's home in Helena, rather than face the shame of poverty in the town where she had grown up. Then the stage robbery that had taken what little money she had managed to scrape together, her decision to ride on alone rather than wait another week in that miserable way station, and finally the storm that had nearly killed her. "Are you having trouble?" the man asked, his voice still turned away. "My fingers will not work," she admitted, hating the weakness in her voice. She heard him sigh, then felt him behind her. "I am going to help. I will not look more than necessary." His hands were warm and competent, unbuttoning her dress with the same practical efficiency he had shown with everything else. He was true to his word, keeping his eyes averted as he helped her out of the sodden garment and held up the dry shirt so she could slip into it. She managed the trousers herself, though they were absurdly large and she had to roll the waist and cuffs. "Thank you," she said quietly. He grunted in response and moved away to hang her wet clothes on pegs near the fire. His own change of clothes had been accomplished quickly, and he now wore dry denims and a different shirt, this one dark blue. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of years of self-sufficiency. "There is coffee," he said, pouring 2 cups from a battered pot he set on a trivet over the fire. "And beans, not much else." "That sounds wonderful," Ophelia said honestly. She had not eaten since dawn, and it was now well past dark. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters, and she could hear the hiss of snow against the walls. They ate in silence at first, sitting across from each other at the small table. The beans were plain but hot, and the coffee was strong enough to strip paint. Ophelia found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking. His hands were scarred and calloused, the hands of a man who worked with them. A cowboy, she guessed, though she wondered what he was doing alone in this cabin in the middle of nowhere. "I am Ophelia Andrews," she said finally, unable to bear the silence any longer. He looked at her over his coffee cup, those gray eyes unreadable. "Pierce Rawlings. Do you live here, Mr. Rawlings, this winter? It is a line camp for the Rockingham Ranch." "I am watching the cattle in the high country," he paused, "was watching them. This storm will have scattered them from here to Canada. I am sorry. Not your doing." He refilled his coffee cup. "Where were you headed when the storm caught you, Helena?" "My aunt lives there." "I was traveling from Holbrook." "That is a long way to be traveling alone, especially this time of year." There was no judgment in his voice, only statement of fact, but Ophelia felt defensive anyway. "I had no choice. My father died 3 weeks ago, and there was nothing left for me in Holbrook. The ranch was lost, and I had no way to support myself." Something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been sympathy. "I am sorry for your loss. Thank you." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, grateful for the warmth. "The stage was robbed 2 days ago. They took everything. I thought if I pushed on quickly, I could reach Helena before another storm hit, but I was wrong." "The Cassidy gang has been working this area," Pierce said. "You are lucky they only took your money." Ophelia knew he was right. She had heard stories of what men like that did to women traveling alone. She had been fortunate the gang had been in a hurry, taking valuables from all the passengers and riding off without violence. "How long do you think the storm will last?" she asked. Pierce stood and moved to the window, opening the shutter a crack to peer out into the darkness. Snow blew in immediately, and he shut it again quickly. "Hard to say. Could be a day, could be a week. This is a bad one. A week." Ophelia tried not to let panic show on her face. A week trapped in this tiny cabin with a stranger. It was scandalous, improper, and completely unavoidable. "We will manage," Pierce said, as if reading her thoughts. "I have supplies enough for 2 for a while. The storm will end eventually. Then you can continue to Helena. What about you? Will you not need to find your cattle when the weather breaks?" He moved back to the fire, adding another log. "Right now, there is nothing to be done but wait." They finished their meal in silence, and when the dishes were washed and put away, an awkward moment arrived. There was one bed. "You take it," Pierce said before she could speak. "I will make a pallet by the fire. I cannot take your bed. You can and you will. I have slept on worse than a wooden floor." His tone made it clear the discussion was over. Ophelia was too exhausted to argue. She climbed into the narrow bed, still wearing the oversized clothes he had lent her, and pulled the rough blankets up to her chin. The mattress was thin but better than the ground, and the warmth of the fire reached even to the corner where the bed stood. She watched Pierce arrange blankets on the floor near the hearth, moving with that same quiet efficiency. He settled himself with his back against the wall, rifle within easy reach, and closed his eyes. The firelight played across his features, softening the hard lines, and Ophelia found herself wondering about him. Who was he? Why was he alone in this isolated place? What had put that scar through his eyebrow and the shadows in his gray eyes? The wind screamed outside and snow hissed against the walls, but inside the cabin was warm and dry and safe. Ophelia felt her eyes growing heavy, exhaustion finally overwhelming fear and uncertainty. Her last conscious thought was that she was alive, and that was more than she had expected an hour ago. She woke once in the night to find Pierce feeding the fire, his movements quiet so as not to disturb her. He glanced over when she stirred, and their eyes met in the darkness. Neither spoke, but something passed between them, some wordless acknowledgement of their strange situation. Then Ophelia closed her eyes again and slept until dawn. The storm still raged the next morning. Ophelia woke to find Pierce already up, the fire built high and coffee made. Her dress and cloak hung near the hearth, still damp despite the fire's heat. "Good morning," she said, sitting up and pushing her hair back from her face. "Morning." Pierce handed her a cup of coffee without looking directly at her. "There is cornbread if you are hungry." They ate breakfast with the same silence that had marked dinner, but it was less uncomfortable now, more companionable. Ophelia found herself stealing glances at him again, noting details she had missed in last night's exhaustion and dim light. He moved with a grace unexpected in a man of his size, and his hands, though scarred, were gentle with objects. He did not slam things down or move roughly, but with care and consideration. "How long have you been at the Rockingham?" she asked, breaking the silence. 3 years. "I came up from Texas after the war." "You fought?" The war had ended in 65, 16 years ago. That made Pierce older than she had first thought, probably 30 or 31, though he had the weathered look of a man who spent his life outdoors. "I did." His tone did not invite further questions on that subject. Ophelia shifted tactics. "Do you like the work? Being a cowboy," he considered this, sipping his coffee. "It suits me. I like the solitude, the honesty of it. Cattle do not lie or cheat or pretend to be something they are not." "People have disappointed you." "People disappoint everyone eventually." He stood, moving to check the fire. "What about you? What did you do in Hallbrook?" "I helped my father run the ranch. After my mother died when I was 12, it was just the two of us. I learned to do everything she used to do and everything he did too. I can brand a calf, deliver a foal, mend fences, keep books." Her voice caught slightly. "For all the good it did, the bank still took it all. That was not your fault. My father borrowed against a dream of expansion that never materialized. The drought 2 years ago killed half our herd. Then he got sick, and we could not keep up with the payments." She set down her coffee cup with more force than she intended. "I am sorry. You do not need to hear my troubles." "We have time," Pierce said simply. And so Ophelia found herself talking, telling him about her father, about growing up on the ranch, about her mother's death and how it had changed everything. Pierce listened without interrupting, occasionally refilling her coffee, his gray eyes steady on her face. When she finally wound down, she felt oddly lighter, as if speaking the words aloud had released some of the weight she had been carrying. "Your aunt in Helena, she is expecting you." Pierce asked. "I wrote to her a month ago, but I do not know if she received the letter. She is my mother's sister. We have not seen each other in years, but she is the only family I have left. What will you do when you get there? Find work, I suppose." "I can keep house, do accounts, teach children, something." The uncertainty in her own voice frightened her. Pierce was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You are braver than you think." Ophelia looked at him in surprise. "I do not feel brave, I feel terrified." "Brave is not the absence of fear. It is doing what needs to be done despite the fear." He stood, collecting their empty plates. My mother used to say that. She sounds wise. She was. The past tense hung heavy in the air. They fell into a routine over the next days as the storm continued unabated. Pierce would wake first, build up the fire, and make coffee. Ophelia would rise and help prepare breakfast, and they would eat together. Then Pierce would tend to his gear, cleaning his rifle, mending tack, while Ophelia tidied the cabin and sometimes read from the single book Pierce owned, a worn copy of Shakespeare's plays. In the afternoons, they would talk, tentative at first, then with growing ease. Ophelia learned that Pierce had grown up in Texas, the youngest of 4 brothers. His parents had died of fever when he was 16, just before the war started. He had lied about his age to enlist, desperate to escape the grief and the emptiness of the farm without his family. He did not speak much about the war itself, but she could see shadows cross his face when it came up. Pierce learned that Ophelia was 24, that she had been engaged once to the son of a neighboring rancher, but he had broken it off when her father's financial troubles became known. She tried to sound matter-of-fact about it, but Pierce heard the hurt underneath. He was a fool, Pierce said bluntly. He was practical. Why tie himself to a woman with no prospects? Because you do not base a life together on prospects. You base it on whether you can stand to be apart. He looked embarrassed as soon as the words left his mouth, as if surprised by his own vehemence. Ophelia felt warmth bloom in her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. That is a romantic notion for a hardened cowboy. I have my moments. His mouth quirked in something that was almost a smile, and Ophelia realized it was the first time she had seen any humor in his expression. On the 4th day, the wind finally began to die down, though snow still fell steadily. Pierce ventured outside to check the conditions and came back covered in white powder, stamping his boots by the door. Drifts are 6 feet in places. The trail will be impassable for days yet, even after the snow stops. Ophelia had been sewing a tear in his spare shirt, something to keep her hands busy, and she looked up at his words. How much longer do you think? Week, maybe more, before you could travel safely. He hesitated. I am sorry. I know this is not how you wanted to spend your time. No, Ophelia said honestly, but there are worse places to be stranded and worse company to be stranded with. That almost smile flickered across his face again. I will take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. Something had shifted between them over the past days, some invisible wall coming down brick by brick. They moved around each other in the small space with increasing ease, no longer carefully avoiding contact. When their hands touched reaching for the same cup or sitting at the table, neither pulled away immediately. They held eye contact longer. Pierce had stopped sleeping with his back rigidly to the wall and now lay on his side, face toward the room, toward her. Ophelia found herself thinking about him at odd moments, about the way his hair curled when it dried after he had been out in the snow, about the quiet strength in his hands, about the rare smile that transformed his serious face. She was falling for him. The realization struck her on the 5th morning as she woke, and her first thought was to see if he was awake yet. She barely knew him. This was completely improper, and yet there it was, undeniable and growing stronger by the hour. That day, as they sat by the fire in the afternoon, Pierce reading aloud from Shakespeare while Ophelia mended another shirt, he stopped mid-sentence. What is wrong? Ophelia asked. Nothing is wrong. I just realized I have not enjoyed another person's company this much in years. He looked at her directly. You are easy to be with, Ophelia. The use of her first name, which he had been doing for the past day or so, sent a flutter through her stomach. You are easy to be with too, Pierce. I am not good with people generally. Too much time alone, I suppose. But with you, it does not feel like work." He set the book aside. "I want you to know that when this is over, when you go to Helena, I will make sure you get there safely. I will take you myself. You do not have to do that. You have your own responsibilities. The cattle will keep. You are more important." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. Ophelia set down her mending, her heart hammering. "Pierce." He moved from his chair to sit beside her on the floor near the fire, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other a handful of days, but I need to say it before I lose my nerve. You are the finest person I have met in my life, and these days with you have meant more to me than the whole past 3 years." "I feel the same way," Ophelia whispered. "I have been trying not to because it seems impossible, but I cannot help it." Pierce reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with his scarred hand. "May I kiss you?" Instead of answering, Ophelia closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepened as Pierce wrapped his other arm around her waist and pulled her closer. She tangled her fingers in his hair, feeling the softness of the curls, tasting coffee and something uniquely him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Pierce rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said, the single word rough with emotion. "When spring comes, do not go to Helena. Stay here with me. I have nothing to offer you, no money, no property, nothing. I do not care about any of that. I have enough for both of us. The Rocking M pays fair wages, and I have saved most of what I have earned. We could build a life together. We hardly know each other. I know enough. I know you are brave and strong and kind. I know you can work hard and laugh at yourself, and that you snore just a little when you sleep on your back." "I do not snore," Ophelia protested, but she was smiling. "Just a little," Pierce insisted, smiling back. Then his expression grew serious again. "I know that I have been alone for a very long time, and I had made peace with that. Then you stumbled through that door half frozen, and everything changed. I do not want to be alone anymore, Ophelia. Not if I can be with you instead." Tears pricked Ophelia's eyes. "I do not want to be alone either. And the thought of leaving you, of going to Helena and never seeing you again, makes me feel like I cannot breathe." "Then stay. Marry me. I know I should do this properly, should court you and give you time, but we do not have the luxury of time. You will leave when the snow melts unless you have a reason to stay. So I am asking you now, without poetry or grace, just honest feeling. Will you marry me, Ophelia Andrews?" She should have said no. It was too fast, too impulsive, too much uncertainty. But when she looked into Pierce's gray eyes, she saw only truth and hope and a loneliness that matched her own. And she realized that sometimes the sensible choice was not the right choice. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Pierce kissed her again, deeper this time, with a passion that stole her breath. They stayed there by the fire for a long time, holding each other, trading kisses and whispered words, making promises for a future that had seemed impossible just days ago. That night, Pierce insisted she still take the bed while he slept by the fire, despite their engagement. "When we are married, things will be different, but until then, I will not compromise your honor more than this situation already has." Ophelia wanted to argue that honor seemed a small concern given everything, but she recognized the firmness in his tone. This mattered to him, this preservation of propriety even in circumstances that had already shattered it. So she kissed him good night and climbed into the narrow bed, lying awake for a long time, listening to his breathing even out into sleep, hardly able to believe what had happened. She was engaged. Again. But this time it felt completely different. With Marcus, her former fiancé, it had been expected, comfortable, the logical joining of neighboring properties. With Pierce, it was fire and feeling and a connection she did not fully understand but could not deny. The next morning, she woke to find Pierce already outside, the door propped open to reveal a world transformed. The storm had finally passed completely, and brilliant sunshine sparkled off fresh snow that covered everything in sight. The sky was a blue so intense it almost hurt to look at, and the air smelled clean and sharp. "It is beautiful," Ophelia said, coming to stand beside him in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket against the cold. "It is. But see those clouds building in the west. Another storm coming, though not as bad as the last one. We might have a day or two of clear weather, then more snow." "Does that mean I could leave if I wanted to?" Ophelia asked quietly. Pierce looked at her, something uncertain in his eyes. "If you were determined, you could probably make it to the next ranch by nightfall. They would take you in, help you get to Helena eventually." "You want me to go?" "God, no. But I want you to be sure. I do not want you to feel trapped into this because of circumstances." Ophelia set down the blanket and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his chest. "I am sure. I have never been more sure of anything. I am not staying because I am trapped. I am staying because I love you." She felt him stiffen in surprise, then his arms came around her, holding her tight. "You love me." "I do. I know it is fast, but yes, I love you, Pierce Rawlings." "I love you too." The words sounded rusty, as if he had not said them in a very long time, but they were all the sweeter for it. "I have since about the second day, I think, when you tried to make breakfast and nearly burned the cornbread and just laughed about it instead of getting upset." "It was terrible cornbread," Ophelia agreed, laughing. "I am better at ranch work than cooking, I am afraid." "Good thing I can cook then. We will make a fine team." They spent that day and the next preparing for the future. Pierce rode out to check the area, found his horse in a makeshift lean-to shelter 100 yards from the cabin, cold but alive. He dug out paths through the snow and assessed what supplies they would need. Ophelia took inventory of what was in the cabin, planning meals, thinking ahead to what a life here might look like. On the evening of the second clear day, Pierce came back from checking the trails with news. "The way to the main ranch is passable. If we leave at first light, we can make it by afternoon." The main ranch, the Rockingham headquarters, that is where the ranch owner lives, where the main bunkhouse is. We can be married there. The owner's wife can stand up with you and the foreman can stand with me. It is not fancy, but it is legal." "When?" Ophelia asked, her heart racing. "Day after tomorrow, if you are willing. The circuit preacher happened to be there when I left 2 weeks ago, snowed in just like us. If he is still there, he can perform the ceremony." "And if I am not willing to wait that long," Pierce pulled her close, kissing her soundly. "Then we would be married yesterday if I could arrange it." They left at dawn, Ophelia riding behind Pierce on his horse, her still damp dress and cloak bundled behind the saddle. The journey was slow through the deep snow, but the horse was strong and sure-footed, and Pierce knew the trails well. They stopped once to rest and eat the cold biscuits and jerky Pierce had packed, standing in waist-deep snow beside a frozen creek. "Are you warm enough?" Pierce asked, rubbing her arms through the coat he had insisted she wear. "I am fine. Stop fussing." "I am going to fuss over you for the rest of my life. You should get used to it now." "The rest of your life is a very long time." "Not nearly long enough," Pierce said seriously, and kissed her cold nose. They reached the Rockingham Ranch headquarters in mid-afternoon, as Pierce had predicted. It was a sprawling complex of buildings. A large main house, a long bunkhouse, several barns and corrals, all dusted with snow and smoke rising from multiple chimneys. Dogs came running out to greet them, barking, and several men emerged from the bunkhouse to see who had arrived. "Rawlings." One of them shouted, We thought you were dead in that line camp. Not dead, just snowed in. Pierce dismounted and helped Ophelia down, keeping a protective hand on her back. Is Mr. Patterson in the house? Where else would he be in this weather? Go on in. Mrs. Patterson will be happy to see a new face. Pierce led Ophelia to the main house, a solid structure of logs and stone with a covered porch running the length of the front. He knocked, and a moment later the door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Pierce, thank goodness you are all right. We have been so worried. Her eyes shifted to Ophelia, curiosity plain on her face. And who is this? Mrs. Patterson, this is Ophelia Andrews. She was caught in the storm and found shelter at the line camp. Ophelia, this is Mrs. Sarah Patterson. She and her husband own the Rockingham. Come in, you must be frozen. Sarah ushered them inside, calling over her shoulder. James. Pierce is here, and he has brought a young lady. The interior of the house was warm and comfortable, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall of the main room and furniture that looked lived in and welcoming. A man appeared from a side room, tall and weathered, with a salt and pepper beard and sharp blue eyes. Pierce, good to see you, boy. And Miss Andrews, welcome to the Rockingham. James Patterson shook both their hands. Sit. Sarah, get them some coffee. Over coffee and cake, Pierce explained the situation, leaving out nothing except the most intimate details of how he and Ophelia had fallen in love. He spoke plainly about finding her half frozen, about the days snowed in together, and finally about his proposal. So we would like to be married as soon as possible, Pierce concluded, if Reverend Thompson is still here and willing to perform the ceremony. Sarah and James exchanged a look. Then Sarah reached over and took Ophelia's hand. My dear, you understand this is all very fast. You have only known Pierce a handful of days. I understand how it looks, Ophelia said quietly, but I also understand my own heart. I love him, Mrs. Patterson. I know it seems impossible, but I do. And I am not a fool. I am 24 years old. I have been in love before, or thought I had been, and I know the difference. This is real. She is right, Pierce said, his voice steady. I know my reputation as a loner, sir. You have said yourself I am not the most sociable of your men, but Ophelia is different. She is everything I did not know I needed. I will spend the rest of my life making sure she never regrets choosing me. James Patterson studied them both for a long moment. Then he nodded. Reverend Thompson is still here, stuck until the road's clear. I will speak to him tonight. If he is willing, we can hold the ceremony tomorrow. You have my blessing, Pierce. You are a good man, and I think you will be a good husband. Thank you, sir. Now then, Sarah said briskly, Ophelia needs a proper dress to be married in, and you, young man, need to let me see to your bride. Shoo, go to the bunkhouse and let the men know there is to be a wedding. James, go with him. Pierce hesitated, looking at Ophelia. Will you be all right? I will be fine. Go. She smiled at him, and he bent to kiss her forehead before following James out into the cold. Once the men were gone, Sarah turned to Ophelia with a warm smile. Now, let us get you settled and find you something suitable to wear. You are close to my daughter's size, and she left several dresses here when she married and moved to Billings. Come, I will show you to your room. Ophelia followed Sarah upstairs to a comfortable bedroom with a real bed, a dresser, and a washstand with an actual mirror. After so many days in the cabin's sparse accommodations, it felt like luxury. The tub is in the room next door, Sarah said. I will have the boys bring up hot water so you can have a proper bath. You must be exhausted from your ordeal. You are very kind. Nonsense. I am just glad you survived. That was a terrible storm. Sarah began pulling dresses from a wardrobe, laying them on the bed for inspection. Now, tell me honestly, are you sure about this marriage? You do not have to go through with it if you are having doubts. I can help you get to Helena or wherever else you need to go." Ophelia sat on the edge of the bed, running her hand over the soft fabric of a blue dress. "I am sure. I know it is fast, and I know people will talk, but I have never been more certain of anything. Pierce is a good man, Mrs. Patterson. He was nothing but respectful the entire time we were snowed in together. He slept by the fire every night and made sure I had the bed. He gave me his clothes when mine were wet and his food when provisions were limited. And more than that, he listened to me. He saw me as a person, not a burden or a problem to be managed. When he asked me to marry him, he was not trying to save me or rescue me. He was asking me to save him from loneliness." Sarah's expression softened. "Then you truly do love him." "I do, with everything I have." "Then I will do everything in my power to give you a proper wedding, even on short notice." Sarah picked up the blue dress. "This one, I think. It will bring out your eyes, and I have a veil somewhere that belonged to my grandmother." The rest of the evening passed in a flurry of activity. Ophelia bathed, washing away days of accumulated grime and exhaustion. Sarah found the veil, delicate lace yellowed slightly with age but beautiful. A young woman named Martha, who helped with the house, took in the blue dress to fit Ophelia's slimmer frame. At dinner, Ophelia met Reverend Thompson, a jovial man in his 60s who had indeed been stranded at the ranch by the storms. "I am delighted to perform your wedding," he said, clasping her hand warmly. "It is nice to have something joyful to do while I wait for the roads to clear. Pierce is a fine young man, and I think you two will be very happy together." Pierce was at dinner too, sitting across from her at the long table, and every time their eyes met, she felt a flutter in her chest. He looked different here, among other people, more comfortable than she would have expected given his professed love of solitude. Several of the ranch hands teased him good-naturedly about his upcoming marriage, and he took it well, even laughing at some of the jokes. After dinner, Pierce walked her outside onto the porch, wrapping her in his coat against the cold. The sky was clear, stars scattered across the black expanse like diamonds on velvet. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Not regretting this yet, not for a second. You? Never." He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "Sarah is taking good care of you. She is wonderful. She is lending me a dress and a veil for tomorrow." Ophelia pulled back to look at him. "Tomorrow I will be your wife." "Tomorrow you will be my wife," Pierce repeated, wonder in his voice. "I keep thinking I will wake up and discover this is all a dream. It is real. I am real." She took his hand and placed it over her heart. "Feel that? I am right here and I am not going anywhere." Pierce kissed her then, deep and sweet, pouring everything he felt into it. When they broke apart, Ophelia was breathless and dizzy and happier than she could remember being in years. "I should let you get to bed," Pierce said reluctantly. "Tomorrow will be a long day, a wonderful day, the most wonderful." He kissed her once more quickly, then stepped back. "Good night, Ophelia. Sleep well." "Good night, Pierce." She watched him walk back toward the bunkhouse, his figure disappearing into the darkness, then turned and went back inside. Sarah was waiting in the front room with a knowing smile. "That young man is head over heels in love with you." "I know," Ophelia said, and felt a smile spread across her face. "And I feel the same way about him." The next morning dawned cold but clear. Ophelia woke early, too excited to sleep, and found Sarah already up and bustling around the kitchen with Martha, preparing food for the celebration after the ceremony. "Sit and eat," Sarah commanded, setting a plate of eggs and biscuits in front of Ophelia. "You need your strength. Weddings are exhausting." "I am too nervous to eat." "Eat anyway. Brides who faint during the ceremony are no good to anyone." Ophelia managed to choke down some of the breakfast, though her stomach was in knots. Upstairs, Sarah and Martha helped her dress, lacing the blue gown and arranging the veil over her dark hair. When Ophelia looked in the mirror, she almost did not recognize herself. The woman looking back was radiant, eyes shining with happiness, cheeks flushed with anticipation. "You look beautiful," Sarah said, dabbing at her eyes. "Pierce is a lucky man. I am the lucky one." The ceremony was held in the main room of the house, the furniture pushed back to make space. Ranch hands crowded in, along with Reverend Thompson, the Pattersons, and a few other families who lived on the property. Pierce stood at the front with James Patterson, wearing a clean white shirt and a string tie someone had lent him, his hair slicked back, that scar through his eyebrow somehow making him look even more handsome. When Ophelia entered on Sarah's arm, his expression transformed. Pure joy and love shone from his face, and she felt answering happiness bubble up in her chest. This was right. This was exactly where she was supposed to be. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. She remembered Pierce's hands, warm and steady, holding hers. His voice, firm and clear, promising to love and honor her all the days of his life. Her own voice, surprisingly steady, making the same promises. The cool metal of the ring James Patterson had lent them sliding onto her finger. And then Reverend Thompson saying, "You may kiss your bride," and Pierce gathering her into his arms and kissing her while everyone cheered. They were married. The celebration afterward was simple but heartfelt. There was food and music, one of the ranch hands playing a fiddle while another accompanied on a mouth harp. Pierce led Ophelia in a dance despite his protest that he was not very good at it, and she laughed as he stepped on her toes twice but held her like she was precious. "Happy?" he asked, spinning her carefully. "Happier than I have ever been." "Good. That is my job now, keeping you happy." "And what is my job?" "Same thing." He grinned at her, that rare full smile that lit up his whole face. "We will keep each other happy." As evening fell, Sarah took Ophelia aside with a meaningful look. "Pierce spoke to James this morning. The cabin at the West Pasture is available. It is larger than the line camp and empty right now. You two will have it as your home. We had the boys get it ready today, so it is clean and supplied. James is giving you the rest of the week to settle in before Pierce needs to return to work." "That is incredibly generous. You are family now, we take care of our own." Sarah hugged her. "Be happy, dear. You both deserve it." Pierce drove them to their new home in a wagon loaded with supplies and gifts from the ranch hands, plus the few belongings Ophelia had from her interrupted journey. The cabin was indeed larger than the line camp, with 2 rooms, a real wood floor and glass windows. Someone had lit the fire before they arrived, so it was warm inside and supplies lined the shelves. "What do you think?" Pierce asked, watching her nervously as she explored. "I think it is perfect. I think we can be very happy here. I will build you a proper house eventually. Something bigger with more rooms for when we have children." "Children?" Ophelia turned to look at him. "I assumed you wanted children. I should have asked before. I want them, but if you do not..." She crossed to him and put her fingers over his mouth, silencing him. "I want children. Lots of them. I want to fill this cabin and whatever house you build with noise and laughter and love." Pierce caught her around the waist and lifted her, spinning her once before setting her down and kissing her thoroughly. "Have I mentioned that I love you?" "Once or twice. But I do not mind hearing it again. I love you, Ophelia Rawlings." Ophelia Rawlings, her new name. It sounded right, like it had always been hers. "I love you too." That night, as husband and wife, they lay together in the bed in their new home, wrapped in each other's arms. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the windows, but inside was warm and safe and perfect. "Thank you," Pierce said softly in the darkness. "For what?" "For stumbling into my cabin half frozen and turning my life upside down. For seeing past the rough exterior to who I am underneath. For choosing to stay when you could have left. For loving me." Ophelia turned in his arms to face him, her hand on his cheek. "Thank you for taking me in, for treating me with respect and kindness. For falling in love with me as quickly as I fell in love with you. For giving me a home when I had lost everything. You have not lost everything. You have me, and I have you. That is all we need." They made love then, gently and sweetly, learning each other's bodies, bringing each other pleasure and comfort. And when they finally slept, tangled together in the narrow bed, both knew they had found something rare and precious in this wild, harsh land. The rest of the winter passed in blissful domesticity. Pierce returned to work, riding out early each morning to tend the cattle, but he came home every night to Ophelia and the warm cabin. She learned to manage their household, improving her cooking with practice, mending their clothes, making the cabin a real home. They talked for hours by the fire, learning every detail of each other's lives. They made love often, discovering the pleasure and intimacy of marriage. They laughed together, worked together, weathered several more storms together. As winter grudgingly gave way to spring, the snow began to melt, revealing the brown grass and rocky soil underneath. Creeks, frozen solid for months, began to run with snowmelt. Birds returned, their songs filling the air. And Ophelia realized two things. First, that she had not had her monthly courses in 6 weeks, and second, that the thought of leaving this place, this life, this man, was absolutely unthinkable. She told Pierce about the baby one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Spring had truly arrived. The trails were clear. If she wanted to leave, to continue to Helena, now was the time. "I have something to tell you," she said, her hand finding his. Pierce turned to look at her, concern immediate on his face. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right. Pierce, I am pregnant." He stared at her for a long moment, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and then pure joy. "You are certain as I can be without a doctor, but yes, I am certain." Pierce let out a whoop of happiness and pulled her into his arms, hugging her tightly but carefully, as if she were suddenly made of glass. "We are having a baby, Ophelia, we are having a baby. We are." She pulled back to look at him. "Are you happy?" "Happy? I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed." He cupped her face in his hands. "You are going to be a mother, I am going to be a father, we are going to be a family. We already are a family. True." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you so much, both of you." That night, as they lay in bed, Pierce's hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach, Ophelia thought about the path that had brought her here. The losses and grief and fear. The desperate ride through the blizzard. Stumbling into that cabin where Pierce had been alone, convinced he would always be alone. The days snowed in that had transformed both their lives. "What are you thinking?" Pierce asked softly. "That I would do it all again. Every terrible thing that happened, every loss, every hard moment. Because they all led me here to you, to this life." I was thinking the same thing. His arm tightened around her. Every wrong turn, every mistake, every moment of loneliness, they were all leading me to you. Spring came, Ophelia said quietly. The snow melted, the trails cleared. And I chose to stay. "Best choice you ever made?" Pierce asked, a hint of teasing in his voice. "Best choice I ever made," Ophelia confirmed. The baby came in the fall, a boy they named Samuel after Pierce's father. The birth was difficult. attended by Sarah Patterson and a midwife from town, but both mother and child came through healthy. Pierce spent the entire labor pacing outside the cabin until James Patterson rode out and forced him to do something productive to occupy his hands. When he was finally allowed in to meet his son, Pierce stood beside the bed with tears streaming down his face, holding the tiny bundle with a mixture of terror and wonder. "He is so small," Pierce whispered. "He will grow," Ophelia said, exhausted but happy. "We will teach him everything. How to ride, how to work the land, how to be a good man like his father." "I am going to do my best," Pierce promised, looking from his son to his wife. "For both of you, always." Samuel was followed 2 years later by a daughter, Rose, who had her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes. Then another son, Thomas, and finally another daughter, Alice. The cabin became too small for their growing family, and true to his word, Pierce built them a proper house on land he had been able to purchase from the Pattersons when they began selling off portions of the ranch. The years passed in a blur of work and family, hardships and joys. The ranch they built together prospered, small at first but growing steadily. Their children grew strong and capable, learning to handle horses and cattle almost before they could walk. Ophelia never did make it to Helena, never met the aunt who had been her destination that snowy day so many years ago. She sometimes wondered what her life would have been like if she had made it there, but never with regret, only curiosity. Pierce proved to be as devoted a husband and father as he had promised. He loved her fiercely, every day, through good times and bad. When Samuel broke his arm falling from a horse, Pierce sat up with him all night. When Rose struggled to learn her letters, Pierce patiently worked with her every evening until she could read as well as any child in the county. He built each of his children their own horse, teaching them to ride with the same care his own father had shown him. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Pierce surprised Ophelia with a ring he had been saving for, a simple gold band with a small diamond that sparkled in the lamplight. "I want to replace the borrowed one properly," he said, slipping it onto her finger. "I want you to have something that is truly yours that I gave you." "You have given me everything," Ophelia said, tears in her eyes. "A home, a family, a life I could never have imagined. You have given me yourself every day for 10 years. And I will give you myself every day for the next 10, and the 10 after that, for as long as we both live." They renewed their vows there in their home, just the two of them, repeating the promises they had made a decade ago. Then they made new promises, specific to the life they had built. Pierce promised to always come home, no matter how hard the work or how far the cattle strayed. Ophelia promised to always have the light burning in the window to guide him. They promised to grow old together, to face whatever challenges came their way side by side. 20 years after that fateful blizzard, Ophelia stood on the porch of their house, watching Pierce teach their youngest grandson how to rope a fence post. At 44, Pierce's hair had threads of silver at the temples, and lines had deepened around his eyes, but he was still strong and capable, still the man who had taken in a frozen stranger and given her his heart. Samuel, their eldest, had married a girl from town and built his own place on the far side of their property. Rose had surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, working at the school in Hallbrook. Thomas was still unmarried, working the ranch with his father. And Alice, their baby, was courting a young man from a neighboring ranch, much to her father's pretended dismay. Ophelia had never imagined she would have this life. All those years ago, fleeing Hallbrook with nothing but grief and fear, she had thought she would become a burden to her aunt, an unmarried woman of dwindling prospects, aging into dependence and obscurity. Instead, she had become a wife, a mother, a partner in building something substantial and lasting. Pierce finished his lesson with their grandson and sent the boy running back to his mother. Then he climbed the porch steps and sat beside Ophelia in the chair they kept there for evenings like this. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, taking her hand. "The blizzard, the cabin, how close I came to dying that night." "Do not think about that." Pierce squeezed her hand. "You did not die, you lived, you found me. We found each other." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if I had not stumbled into that cabin?" "Never. Because this is the only life I want, the only one that makes sense." He kissed the top of her head. "You are my whole heart, Ophelia. You have been since the moment you turned around from that wall and looked at me with those eyes full of determination and fear and stubborn strength." "I love you," she said simply, the words as true now as they had been in that tiny cabin all those years ago. "I love you too. Always have. Always will." They sat together as the sun set, painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Ophelia thought about choices. The choice to ride out alone despite the threatening weather. The choice to fight through the storm instead of lying down in the snow to die. The choice to trust a stranger. The choice to fall in love against all logic and reason. The choice to stay when spring came and the way was clear. Every choice had led to this moment, to this man, to this life, and she would not change a single one. Years later, when Ophelia was 68 and Pierce 71, they sat in the same chairs on the same porch, now worn smooth by decades of use. Their grandchildren had grandchildren now, and the house was often full of noise and life. The ranch had prospered beyond their early dreams, and their children had done well, building lives and families of their own. Pierce's hair was completely white now, and he moved more slowly, but his eyes were still that same clear gray, and when he looked at Ophelia, she saw the same love that had been there on their wedding day. Her own hair had gone silver, and her hands were gnarled with arthritis, but she could still manage a horse when necessary and kept the best books of any ranch in 3 counties. "You remember," Pierce said one evening as they watched another sunset, "how I asked you to stay when spring came?" "Of course I remember. It was the second best moment of my life." "What was the best?" "When you asked me to marry you." "No, wait. When Samuel was born." "No, when Rose learned to read that poem and recited it for us. Actually, when Thomas brought in his first calf all by himself." "And when Alice walked down the aisle at her wedding," Ophelia laughed. "I cannot choose. There have been too many best moments." "I know what you mean." Pierce reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of decades of practice. "Every moment with you has been the best moment. Even when I burned that entire pot of stew and we had to eat bread and cheese for dinner. Even then. Even during the bad times, the scared times, the times when we did not think we would make it through, because we were together." Ophelia felt tears prick her eyes. After all these years, he could still make her cry with his simple, honest declarations of love. "I am so glad I stumbled into your cabin that night. I am so glad you were stubborn enough not to freeze to death first." They laughed together, the sound comfortable and familiar, and watched the day fade into night. Somewhere in the house, they could hear their family, the voices of children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren blending together in the chaos that came with gatherings. But out here on the porch, it was just the two of them as it had been at the very beginning. Spring came every year, melting the snow, clearing the trails, making the world new again. And every year, Ophelia chose to stay. Not because she was trapped or obligated, but because this was where she belonged. With Pierce. In this life, they had built together. In this love that had started in a snowbound cabin and had grown deeper and stronger with every passing season. "Thank you," Pierce said softly, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on the back of her hand. "For what? For staying. For choosing me. For making my life more than I ever thought it could be. Thank you for being worth staying for." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged, one by one, diamonds scattered across black velvet, the same stars that had shone down on a tiny cabin and two lonely people falling in love all those years ago. The same stars that would shine down on the family they had created, the legacy of that fateful blizzard and the choice made when spring came. Ophelia had lost everything the winter she was 24. Her father, her home, her security, her future. And in losing everything, she had found Pierce. She had found love and purpose and a life richer than anything she could have imagined. The snow had held them together long enough to recognize what they had found. Spring had given her the choice, and she had chosen love. She had chosen him. Every day, for more than 4 decades, she had chosen him. It was, without question, the best choice she had ever made. Inside the house, someone called for them to come in for supper. But Pierce and Ophelia sat a moment longer, hands clasped, hearts entwined, watching their life unfold around them in the laughter and love of their family. Two people who had been alone had found each other in the worst possible circumstances and had built something beautiful. The blizzard had brought them together. Spring had tested their resolve. And love, patient and true and everlasting, had given them a lifetime of happiness neither had dared to hope for in those dark, desperate days. Finally, as the evening grew cold, Pierce stood and helped Ophelia to her feet. They walked inside together, fingers still intertwined, into the warmth and light and love that filled their home. Behind them, the Montana night settled over the land, quiet and peaceful. Another day ended, another tomorrow promised. And in the morning, when they woke in the bed they had shared for over 40 years, they would begin again. Another day of choosing each other, of building their life together, of honoring the vows made in a borrowed dress and a string tie before a handful of witnesses. Pierce Rawlings had been a lonely cowboy, convinced he would spend his life alone. Ophelia Andrews had been a desperate woman with nowhere left to turn. A blizzard had forced them together. Days in a snowbound cabin had let them see each other's hearts. And when spring came, when the choice was hers to make, Ophelia had chosen to stay. It had been the beginning of everything. The beginning of their family, their ranch, their legacy. But most importantly, it had been the beginning of a love story that would last a lifetime and beyond, told and retold to children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The story of how a stranger stumbled through a cabin door and changed everything. The story of how love can bloom even in the coldest winter. The story of how sometimes the best things in life come from the worst circumstances. As they settled into bed that night, Pierce pulled Ophelia close, her head resting on his chest where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "I love you too," she whispered back. And in the darkness of their bedroom, surrounded by the life they had built, the family they had created, the love they had nurtured for more than 40 years, they slept peacefully. Two souls intertwined, two hearts beating as one, two lives made complete by the simple, profound choice to love each other every single day. The snow had brought them together, but love had made them stay. And in the end, that was all that mattered.